The time has come. Good to see you, everyone. My name is Robbie Howell. Pardon my voice, I am getting over a sickness, but despite that, I need to make a video right now because it is time, at last, to announce the winners of the Enclave Aspirant Edition Class Inclusion Poll. If you weren't here for the voting, there are 4 batches of 3 classes each that were put up to be voted on to be added to the next edition of Enclave. And we had 29 people participate in the poll to choose the next one. Thank you so much to everyone who voted. And if you wanted to vote but couldn't, don't worry, there will be other opportunities to contribute to Enclave's forward development coming in the not terribly distant future. But with all that prattling out of the way, let us move on to announcing the first of our 4 winners, the Vitality winner. And the Vitality winner is the Samaritan. Yes, indeed, the Samaritan. It's going to be a nice, classic support class, though it still will have enough unconventionality to feel properly like an Enclave class. I will say the Samaritan comfortably won its bracket over both the Orator and the Yeoman, with the Orator coming in second and the Yeoman in third. Though overall, though the Samaritan did win by a fairly respectable margin, this was the most equally competitive bracket. All 3 of these classes had a chance at winning, even right up until about halfway through the poll, before the Samaritan went out into the distinct lead. So big congrats to the Samaritan and to everyone who voted for it, and if you're bummed to see it, don't you worry, there are still going to be ways that those other 2 will be able to make it into the game. I will discuss those at the end of the video. But let's move on to our next winner, the Spirit winner. Out of these 3 Spirit classes displayed in the poll, the winner is the Vessel. Perhaps unsurprising to those of you following the discussion in our Discord server, the Vessel was by far and away the most dominant win out of all 4 brackets. It got the most votes of any class in the poll, and it wasn't particularly close. The Progenitor came in a respectable second, and the Squire unfortunately got dominated. But don't you worry, if you really were hoping for one of those 2 classes, like I said, there will be opportunities for both of them to be included in the not too distant future. The Vessel, I think, is going to be a great add to the game, brings a lot of exciting high-risk elements, and it has a lot of heavy acting commitment, which we always love to see in Enclave, plus a very unique kit with some really interesting mechanics and a very distinctive feel. It's a great addition, and I'm sure it will become a fan favorite very soon. But let's move on to the first of 2 ties. Yes, there were 2 stats, the 2 remaining ones, that were literally tied perfectly. And I had to do some really hard thinking to cast the winning vote for these 2. So let's begin with the Will winner. The winner for the Will stat out of a tie is the Witch Hunter. Wow, this one was really, really tough for me to pick. It was tied with the Scion. The Eudaimon was unfortunately pretty far behind in third, but it was very difficult for me to pick between the Witch Hunter and the Scion, especially given how much interest and support there were on both sides. Let me give you a few of my reasons for choosing the Witch Hunter over the Scion. One, its specialties, being an anti-mage specialist, are a bit more unique. The Scion, while it has some really cool, unique stuff, it kind of fills a niche that we already see in the game right now, whereas the Witch Hunter, I think, would be very, very different than anything we see right now. It also gives us another non-gun ranged class. If the Yeoman had 1 Vitality, I would probably have ended up giving this to the Scion for that reason. The Scion also plays a little more like the Vessel, namely both of them are very magically focused, and also both of them have a very high risk, high reward, kind of endangering and risking yourself and others in order to yield great power. And the main downside, namely that the Witch Hunter and the Vessel are both kind of dark and broody classes, I think is actually outweighed by the Scion playing more similarly to the Vessel, even if the Witch Hunter feels a little more like the Vessel. So it was a really tight decision. I hope you guys understand why I ended up making the choice that I did. And as I've been mentioning, if you were really hoping that one of these other classes made it in, I know there's going to be a lot of Scion fans out there who are a little bummed about this. Don't you worry, they will have chances to make it in quite soon. But for now, the Witch Hunter is being added to the roster. And lastly, Another tie. Oh, why do you guys do this to me? But even though the decision was tough, I'm very glad that my choices were competitive enough that we've had such tight races. Let's move on to the Vigor winner. The new addition from the Vigor stat will be the Free Runner. Yes, indeed, the Free Runner tied with the Tessernaut. The Pugilist was well behind in third, with the Pugilist having the ignominy of having the fewest votes of all classes. Poor Pugilist. We love you, Pugilist. You'll get in the game someday, I promise. So, much like with the Witch Hunter, it was very difficult for me to decide between the Tessernaut and the Free Runner, but I would like to give you my reasoning for my choice. One, the Free Runner will be the only class in base Aspirant Edition that will have baseline modern theming. We do have a futuristic themed class in the Infiltrator, as well as classes from all sorts of other time frames, but there's none that are like distinctly modern feeling, and the Free Runner has that kind of urban feel, which I think will really diversify the way people approach the game and characters in it just by being reminded that such an option exists. Two, it is a low complexity class, whereas the Tessernaut is very high complexity. And while I love high complexity classes, we do have quite a few of them, especially with classes like the Vessel being added. And so I wanted another nice, simple, and straightforward class that has an extremely unique playstyle. The Tessernaut is also very unique, but the Tessernaut, you could argue, feels a little more like the Thunderbird or the Wanderer, whereas the Free Runner really doesn't feel like any class that is going to be an Aspirant Edition, except for maybe the Infiltrator. And so even though obviously both of them are completely unique classes, I think in terms of pure feel, the Free Runner feels a little more unique. And lastly, the Tessernaut was not originally my idea. It was originally a player-created class back in Legacy Edition, and while this didn't bother me, and is not something I ever would have mentioned or held as a deciding factor in any other context, for the purposes of splitting a tie, that is the sort of thing that I want to pay some attention to, because having the core Aspirant roster all be classes that I came up with myself, concept and all, maybe feels a little bit more appropriate. And so, the Free Runner will be joining us. But again, do not despair if you were hoping that the Tessernaut or the Pugilist would be added, because now it's time for me to tell you all what is next. So, we have all of these classes selected. I'm going to be working on art commissions and implementing them in the rough draft for Aspirant Edition. You might even have a chance to get on your hands on them early. I'm going to have details for a cool event I'm working on announced in the near future. But also, even if a class hasn't made it out of this poll, there will be another chance for them to be added to Aspirant Edition. The end of this year, or maybe early next year, I will be launching a second poll open to the entire community, just like this one was, determining which classes are offered as stretch goals for the next Kickstarter campaign. There's going to be all 8 of these classes plus 16 more across all the other stats, and you will be able to vote for a pretty decent number of them, not just a couple. And so, they are going to have another chance to get into the game alongside a whole litany of other awesome classes that I cannot wait to show you. But until then, thank you all so much for participating in this poll. I hope it was fun for you. It was certainly fun for me, and I certainly hope that you are excited for the future of Enclave from here. As always, my name is Robbie Howell. Keep a weathered eye out for more news on Aspirant Edition and Enclave in general. And ciao for now.